Senator Paul, you don't know what you're talking about. Okay? Dr. Fauci, you are killing us. Anthony Fauci, I piss on you. I love that. All right, welcome back to the party, everybody. I am your host, Lutch, aka the Indian Jesus, here to resurrect the second coming of common sense. Let's party like they did in the 80s. If you remember, during the 80s, there was the AIDS crisis. If you remember, over the past 3 years, we had a different type of crisis. And guess who was on top of both of those crises? So we have a video here from Jimmy Dore, who was talking about the last time the entire country hated Dr. Fauci. So let's check it out.
So what people don't remember for some reason is that during the AIDS crisis, Dr. Fauci was the enemy of the gay community, because they claimed he was keeping drugs away from them that could help them. And in fact, they did a movie called The Dallas Buyers Club, and it was all about how these gay people had to come together and illegally or serendipitously or secretly get drugs that would help people who had AIDS that the government was trying to suppress.
I had no idea that was directly, I mean, obviously I knew that it was based, Dallas Buyers Club was based on a real events. But I didn't realize that it was specifically about what Fauci was doing.
Because Big Pharma couldn't make money off him. That's the basis of that movie, The Dallas Buyers Club. And the guy who was the bad guy in that movie is Dr. Fauci. He was the one keeping drugs from those people. And he did the exact same thing with Corona.
Meanwhile, approving a drug that was poison.
for AIDS, yes.
Yeah.
So, did you know that gay liberal activists stormed the NIH in 1990?
I didn't. Please tell me more.
They blamed Dr. Anthony Fauci for blocking cheap and effective AIDS treatments and for only promoting expensive and toxic drugs that benefited Big Pharma.
Wait a minute. Are we talking about the same Anthony Fauci? Dr. Anthony? He would never do that.
A lot of people say he did the exact same thing with COVID.
I mean,
the exact same thing. The exact same thing. That's what people are saying. He did the exact same.
If the shoe fits.
Same thing. What?
They're all wrong.
Yeah. Oh, they're all wrong.
Like, people every so often just make up conspiracies about Fauci every pandemic.
Yeah, every time.
That's a normal thing that happens. That happens to everybody, right? Everybody's been there. You've been blamed for an entire pandemic.
Fauci did the exact same thing during COVID-19. That's so I don't know. Here's a picture. Dr. Fauci, you're killing us. I don't know if there's Reagan. They wasted 2 years you're killing us.
Wasted 2 years. That is something so unfamiliar to my experience, particularly when it comes to Dr. Fauci.
Well, look at like Reagan's the president back then.
Yeah.
It shows you how bipartisan that he's been the whole time for every president doing the same big pharma shit.
Yes.
The whole
Fauci,
time.
you mean? Yeah.
I don't necessarily know if it's bipartisanship as much as it's just that everything is politicized these days. It makes sense that what we saw with the AIDS pandemic would have been what we would have expected would have happened with Rona, but because everything got so politicized and the media made you take sides, then that didn't happen.
So here's a quick video that gives you it's about this protest.
I'm Michael Petrellis, and I'm pissed. You know, the whole thing with the National Institutes of Health is they won't test any of these drugs that'll keep people alive. And I got this.
Won't test drugs that will keep people alive. No, that doesn't sound like the past few years.
No peptide T, no compound Q. Anthony Fauci, I piss on you.
Anthony Fauci, I piss on you. I love that.
We're protesting out here in front of the fucking NIH because they're not hiding all drugs and they're not coming out with the cure and they're not doing their job.
We're talking about their conflict of interest with the pharmaceutical companies. We're talking about the fact that they don't allow people of color into their trials. We're talking about the fact that they don't care about women. They don't care about children.
And if you think about it, one of the biggest criticisms of Donald Trump was the people he had around him. And I think that's a very accurate criticism. But when it comes to Fauci, you already knew. You lived through that time period. You saw all of this happening. And then what? You know, there's something to be said, at least for people that he brought in, that he may not have known that were going to be bad in this way, that way, whatever. But we knew who Dr. Fauci was for decades. Yet he was still the leader of all of this. Trump could have fired him. Why didn't that happen?
There's a blatant conflict of interest, and this runs rampant through all of NIH. And this is the history of how AZT became the subject of over 80% today of the studies being done by NIH for AIDS treatments. This one drug that's already shown itself to be highly toxic, very expensive, and of, at best, extremely limited.
Dr. Fauci, you are killing us. Let me back that up a second. Look where that was.
To be highly toxic.
You can see his
very
name there.
expensive,
Dr. Fauci, you are killing us.
and of, at best, extremely limited effectiveness.
So it seems very similar to how they wouldn't do the tests on hydrogen, they wouldn't do the tests on hydrogen, and they wouldn't do.
And I'm pretty sure I'm going to block those out. But, you know, the horse medicine and the hydro whatever thing that Trump was talking about.
Because it takes a lot of money to do those kind of big tests. And then they would, when they would do a test, they would do it incorrectly. They wouldn't give the right dosage. They would give it to people at the wrong times. They would do things that would, they knew would.
You juke the numbers a little bit.
Yeah.
So, and why? It's not like we've ever seen Dr. Fauci under oath lying about the work that he's done, right? We've never seen that. We would never expect that.
So that's what a lot of people are saying. There's more to this video.
It's too toxic for me, and there's nothing which I can take. And the only drug which these people seem to have any concern with is AZT. Obviously, there's something going on here between the makers of AZT and the NIH.
So I assume AZT is the medication that people with AIDS needed. And eventually, we know that now it's no longer a death sentence. Why? Because they got the proper medication. But how many of the people in this video, how many people that were at that protest died who didn't need to because of Dr. Anthony Fauci?
Fauci is the head of the NIH, and he hasn't done much.
And that's still true. After that pandemic and this pandemic, he's still the leader of the NIH. How does that work?
In that area, 80% of the drugs are still dealing with AZT. And the NIH runs the drug trial systems.
Okay, so maybe AZT was the bad medication that had these side effects, wasn't effective, so on and so forth. And that's what they were funding. Big Pharma.
Staff of NIH, the very people that make the decisions about which treatments are going to get studied and which treatments are going to be ignored, are getting money from the leading drug companies to do testing of those drugs.
It's so great that we've cleaned all that up and that doesn't happen anymore. Why is that still the same thing?
So what happened to the gay community during coronavirus? Why did they forget this? What happened to the LGBT
I'll tell you the sad
community?
thing, probably a bunch of people are dead by now because they couldn't
That's
try
what
other
I
drugs.
said.
We probably just had to wait out.
But you don't think that gay people who are my age remember that?
Yeah, where are all the people who were at that protest who didn't die and then showed up 10, 15 years later? Be like, oh, Dr. Fauci, yeah, great.
I wondered, dude.
Right? And where the hell are they?
Is this in the Disney Plus Fauci documentary about his amazing life too?
Nope.
I wonder. Because Disney's a big pro LGBTQ.
Yeah, I know.
Did they mention this?
I don't know if they mentioned this.
Nope. I didn't even watch it. And I can tell you, they didn't mention this. Trust me.
Let's watch more of this. They literally stormed the NIH.
As we can see.
Now, if when Trumpers do this, they call them all terrorists.
With a severed head onto. I mean,
Well, they got Fauci's head on a
Kathy
stick.
Griffin can't even do that on Twitter.
That's
they showed
right.
up with a head on a stick.
That was back, at least when, that all that was going on. That was back in a time where you were at least allowed to protest, as the Constitution enshrines. Now, it depends on what message you're protesting. If you're protesting something that they like, then you're a terrorist. If you're protesting something that they also don't like, oh, you're fine.
at his office.
Yeah, like that seems more threatening than anything anyone said on it at all.
No peptide tea.
Yeah, you can see him there with the Fauci on Fauci's head on a stick.
No compound Q. Anthony Fauci, I piss on you.
I love that. I love it. Anthony
It's
Fauci, I
amazing
piss
even
on
back then
you.
they were calling, and you know, especially back in the 80s, the way like, yeah, whatever, they're gay. Everybody could just dismiss
Yeah,
that.
you could dismiss them because they were gay with
And
AIDS.
then now you get to see it now. Come back. I guess that's what happens when you do that.
Karma. I don't even really believe in karma like that, but karma.
But now it seems like I don't know where those people are. Where are the radicals inside the gay community? They're gone. They're not talking about any of this stuff anymore.
Wait, where are the radicals in the gay community? They're still there. They're just fighting for the exact opposite. We're not just talking about anybody who's gay. We're talking about the activists who are out there, not the people who just happen to be gay, who are looking to just live their lives. We're talking about the people who are out on Twitter every day, on TikTok, those people. They're there. They're just fighting for the opposite message now. Why? Who knows?
They have complete amnesia.
I mean, probably the same place half the hippies went after the 60s and they became yuppies.
Great point.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Here's what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Tweeted out. Fact checkers denounced me for promoting vaccine misinformation when I pointed out Fauci's agency owned Moderna's patent and stood to make $500 million in money from the vaccine that Fauci developed in his lab, exempted from viable safety testing and liability, and then forced on public with lies, propaganda, and coercion. What a business plan. Now, that's what he's saying. I'm not saying it because the vaccine was tested fully and it's super safe and effective and it keeps you from getting seriously ill or dead. And,
yeah, what he said.
And it slows the transmission. It's great.
Why would you believe Robert F. Kennedy Jr. over Dr. Fauci?
Why would you believe a hero to the environmental movement up until he found out about vaccines? He was a hero.
Yeah, I call
He's
him
like man of the year.
Sourpuss is what I call him.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a Kennedy. He's not exactly a Fauci.
Under the agreement with Moderna, the company made what is described as a $400 million catch-up payment to the NIH.
Does that surprise anybody? The amount of money that is thrown around with zero liability. Doesn't matter what happens. You could grow another arm. Every child in America could have a boil on their head. No liability.
So do you see how this works? Then Fauci gets to distribute that money. So that's how Fauci keeps a muzzle on anybody who wants to speak against what the NIH is saying, because he controls the purse strings with everybody who gets research money.
Yeah, everybody who gets research money, but not people like Rand Paul who will call him out. And even though he's going to lie under oath,
Senator Paul, you don't know what you're talking about. Okay, this is completely inaccurate. It's not gain of function. It's just a function. We made it more, and that's called directed evolution.
Come on, bro.
You know, the same way they have a muzzle on you at your job.
Yes.
Yeah,
and that's how they.
It's probably going to get demonetized. So if you want to leave that super thanks, please do.
Control people in universities.
That's how every job works. For everything from comedy to, that's how you got Jon Stewart to not mention that thing again.
Yeah.
That's what cancel culture was. All these dippy liberals thought was just great. It's a way to it's basically like sanctions and terrorism is what it is.
And that's exactly right. This is where cancel culture leads to. It starts out with, the Weinsteins, and it gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and weaker and weaker and weaker, and then anybody can be canceled. This is not a good way to run society. If you are Dr. Fauci and you went through all of that with the AIDS pandemic, there should be no avenue for you to still have a job. And then when another pandemic comes up, even if you do have that job, everybody should be able to say, maybe you step aside here, bro. But the ego on that man would never, ever, ever, ever let that happen. Did you know that Fauci was the head of the NIH back then? Were you aware of these types of protests back then? Let me know in the comments below, guys. Thank you so much for partying with me. I'm your host, Lutch, a.k.a. the Indian Jesus, here to resurrect the second coming of common sense. Until next time, guys, I am out of here. Peace.